I was gonna say, Rico, you should, like, at the beginning of this episode, you should have like the instrumental version of the Bells of Notre Dame play, and then lead into the. I think that'd be really cool, but I don't know, PJ's imagination.
I'm not sure I'd feel comfortable with that just for copyright reasons.
Oh yeah, true. Oh, dang,
oh, we can do
people.
It.
Well.
Bong 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 boom bum bum bong boom bum 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 bum. Look, it's a man with a puppet on in Paris, the city. See, there you go. The end. The beginning.
Oh.
That's not copyrighted. That's just
true.
Are you nostalgic, a parent, or perhaps a child at heart? When it comes to children's media, from books to TV shows, and even movies, there's often more than meets the eye. Is it well written? Does it still hold up today? What works and what doesn't? Or maybe you wonder what went on behind the scenes of that work. Together, a trio of adults who are also kids at heart will critique and comment on one piece of children's media each episode.
Hello, this is Eric.
Hi, I'm PJ.
And I'm Rico. You're listening to Beyond the Lens, a family-friendly podcast.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Lens. I'm PJ, joined by Rico and Eric, again. And by again, I mean this is a re-recording of a previous episode where we covered my favorite movie of all time, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Disney's version, that is. Rico already stated this on our website, but in case you didn't see it, due to technical difficulties, the majority of our first recording of this episode unfortunately got corrupted. And yeah, I was really sad about it, but I also realized after we recorded it that there were a lot of things that I forgot to say about the movie and adaptations anyways. And I also stated some things incorrectly, so this is actually mostly a good thing. I'm actually very happy I get to do this episode over again. And I would like to deeply apologize for missing the previous episode. I've had a lot going on in my personal schedule, but hopefully I'll be able to continue being in all the episodes from here on out. So I already know your guys' answers to this, but I'm going to have to ask this again. How familiar are you two with Disney's version of The Hunchback of Notre Dame?
Never heard of Disney. No, I definitely watched this growing up. Not as often as some of the other ones. This was, I think it was around Lion King was when I stopped really like watching consistently all of the new releases. So I saw this one on and off. Pocahontas, same thing. Like everything after that. I'm more familiar with this as a high school student and then growing into an adult because that's when the music really spoke to me more. And the plot and everything. So, I mean, I've seen this a dozen times at least.
Well, for me, I'm not all that familiar. I watched it in preparation for this episode, but I don't know that much apart from that.
And it's a really complex film anyway, so I'm going to have to explain a lot of this. So once again, this is going to be a really long summary of the film, so hold on tight. This might take a while. Before I go on to Disney's version, though, allow me to provide some context. This movie, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, was written based off the Victor Hugo novel of the same name, and the original book was very dark, to say the least. To quote a cartoon that we already did a podcast on, he was so ugly that everyone died. The end. That isn't even an exaggeration. That's literally how the book went. So, as you can imagine, making this novel into a Disney movie provided some challenges. How they were able to overcome those challenges and somehow get away with a G rating, I will never know, as you're about to find out. Now, this movie opens up with one of the greatest things of all time, in my humble opinion. It starts off with a 5-minute musical number called The Bells of Notre Dame, sung and narrated by the gypsy leader Clodplaye. By the way, I'm aware that the term gypsy is considered offensive to the Romani people, but please know that I'm only using the term gypsy because that's what's used in the film. I'm just using it for the purpose of addressing this film. I hope that makes sense. And I apologize in advance if I still somehow use it incorrectly. Anyways, so in this 5-minute song, it describes an entire story, like a 20-year history lesson of how Paris and Notre Dame came to be. The song begins with a group of gypsies sneaking illegally into Paris, but are trapped by the Minister of Justice and essentially the governor, air quote, of Paris, Judge Claude Frollo. After they're caught, the woman of the group, carrying a bundle, attempts to flee after Frollo thinks that the bundle is actually stolen goods. When Frollo catches up to her as she's trying to gain sanctuary into Notre Dame, Frollo kicks her down the steps of the cathedral, and yeah, she's dead. Then Frollo realizes that her bundle is actually a misshapen baby. There's no other way to put it.
I just think that's really funny. It's like, she's dead. Let's move on. That was a very John Mulaney version of this story.
I love him too.
That's great.
Anyway, so then Frollo realizes that her bundle is actually a misshapen baby, and of course he's like, oh crud, what do I do? Then he sees a nearby well. As he's about to drop the child down the well, the Archdeacon of Notre Dame finally shows up and reminds Frollo of what he just did to the child's mother. Frollo initially denies that he did anything wrong, saying that the woman fled from him, but the Archdeacon reminds him again that Notre Dame, or more specifically Mother Mary in this case, is watching him. And that's when Frollo realizes, oh, crud, yep, can't murder people. And as the song quotes, Frollo felt a twinge of fear for his immortal soul. Frollo asks what he should do, and the Archdeacon replies that Frollo must raise the child as his own. Frollo isn't too happy about this, but then says that the child could be of use to him one day. He then names the child Quasimodo, because it supposedly means half-formed in some language. I've yet to actually find out if this is true, but that's what they say. Anyways, 20 years later, Quasimodo is still up in the bell tower, and the only company he really has are 3 gargoyles. I'll go into more detail as we go on, but the gargoyles' names are Victor, Hugo, appropriate, and Laverne. Okay, so a lot of people and even Disney's production team say that the gargoyles are a figment of Quasimodo's imagination. I refuse to believe this still because there are several loopholes and flaws in the movie and sequel that actually prove that the gargoyles are real, as much as I wish they weren't there. But regardless, they do have a role in the movie, which again, I'll explain later on. So Quasimodo has a desire to obviously leave the bell tower, and his main goal is to attend the annual Feast of Fools. After Frollo finds out that Quasi wants to leave, we're taken to another song called Out There. And what I really like about this movie is that some of the songs are split into contrasting halves. So they turn into these beautiful pieces of artwork. This song is one of them. And Quasi's part of the song is probably the most recognizable song from the movie. So Frollo sings his part, then Quasi sings his part. Despite Frollo's warnings from his part, Quasimodo sneaks out of the cathedral to attend the Feast of Fools, where we meet Esmeralda, a gypsy dancer who, to say the least, entrances and disgusts Frollo while he's watching the entire festival. After that, Quasi's cover is blown, and he's then crowned the King of Fools due to his outer appearance, but then is humiliated by Frollo's henchmen during the whole thing. Frollo refuses to help Quasimodo, but you know who does? Esmeralda. Esmeralda frees Quasimodo from his restraints and openly defies Frollo. She then throws the crown at Frollo, deeming him to be the biggest fool. Frollo immediately orders her arrested, but she escapes by means of illusions, which Frollo refers to as witchcraft. Frollo confronts Quasimodo after failing to catch Esmeralda and sends him back inside Notre Dame for a big time out. Esmeralda follows Quasimodo to find him, but she herself is followed by Phoebus, Frollo's captain of the guard. Phoebus, who himself doesn't really approve of Frollo's methods, refuses to arrest Esmeralda inside the cathedral, saying that she's claimed sanctuary even though she really didn't, and thus cannot be arrested as long as she remains in Notre Dame. Frollo's about to kick Esmeralda out himself, but deja vu, the Archdeacon appears out of nowhere again. It reminds Frollo that he needs to respect the sanctity of the church, so everyone is kicked out besides Esmeralda and Quasi, or so everyone thinks. And this next scene, I don't know how Disney got away with this again, but Frollo basically grabs Esmeralda slightly inappropriately and then warns her once more if she steps outside Notre Dame. She's his. Then Esmeralda starts to sing God Help the Outcasts, probably the most beautiful and, to me, the most relatable song in the movie. It brings tears to my eyes every time I listen to it. And shortly afterwards finds Quasimodo in the bell tower and befriends him. As gratitude for helping him in the crowd, Quasimodo helps Esmeralda escape Notre Dame. In return, she leaves him with the necklace that has a map to the gypsy hideout called the Court of Miracles. As Esmeralda leaves, and oh boy, comes my favorite song in the film. As I mentioned earlier, a couple of the songs in this movie are divided into contrasting halves. This is the other one. Quasi begins to sing Heaven's Light, which brilliantly and beautifully transitions to Hellfire. Heaven's Light is about Quasi's hopes of being with Esmeralda, while Frollo realizes his lustful feelings for Esmeralda and complains about them while singing to a fireplace. During his big musical number, one of his guards interrupts and tells Frollo of Esmeralda's escape. And to this day, I still can't tell if Frollo was more mad about Esmeralda escaping or his musical number being interrupted, but I thought that was an amazing scene. The next day, after telling Phoebus he had a little trouble with the fireplace, Frollo clearly shows that he completely lost his marbles because he starts to burn down all of Paris, including an innocent family. Phoebus defies Frollo by saving said innocent family. Frollo then orders to have Phoebus executed for treason, but is assisted in escape by Esmeralda. But as Phoebus is escaping on Frollo's horse, ironically named Snowball, God knows why, he's hit by an arrow and falls into the river and is basically left for dead, but is somehow rescued by Esmeralda again, who takes him to Quasimodo for refuge. Sorry, that was a bit of a run-on sentence there. Anyway, next comes the worst song of the film. There's a song called A Guy Like You. It's sung by all three gargoyles, and really, in my opinion, it serves literally no purpose in the movie. They're just like, hey, Paris is on fire. Let's sing about love and build up Quasi's confidence about going out with Esmeralda, only to be crushed in the very next scene when Quasi sees Esmeralda kissing Phoebus, and that made my heart shatter for Quasimodo. In the meantime, Frollo soon returns to the cathedral, forcing Quasimodo to hide Phoebus. Discovering that Quasimodo helped Esmeralda escape, Frollo lies and says that he knows where the Court of Miracles is and that he intends to attack it at dawn with his army. After he leaves, Phoebus comes out of hiding, and he and Quasimodo begin to search for the Court of Miracles and successfully find it, but are ambushed by the gypsies, and they accuse them of being spies, in which they start to sing their theme song, The Court of Miracles. As they're almost hung by Clodplaye, they're saved when Esmeralda intervenes and clears up the misunderstanding. Phoebus tries to get the court to retreat as Frollo plans to invade. However, Frollo's army appears and captures them all, with the judge revealing that he followed Phoebus and Quasimodo. Of course. Frollo then orders Esmeralda to be burned at the stake after she refuses his proposal of her becoming his, there's no light way to put it, his mistress. Quasimodo is now chained up in the bell tower and initially refuses to help because he's depressed, but when he sees Esmeralda in pain, he gives in to his anger, rescues her, brings her to the cathedral, and yells sanctuary. As Frollo grabs a sword and orders his men to attack the cathedral, Phoebus gets the people of Paris to fight back against Frollo, and in the meantime, Quasimodo places Esmeralda unconscious on a bed and pours a cauldron of molten copper onto the streets to ensure that nobody's going to get inside the cathedral. Frollo, however, also, of course, manages to break in and force his way past the archdeacon. Quasimodo, believing that Esmeralda is dead, breaks down in tears beside her as Frollo finally comes into the room to try and attempt to stab Quasimodo with a dagger, but Quasi sees his shadow, stops him, drops the dagger, and guess who wakes up? Disney, you've done it again. Esmeralda is somehow alive. Quasimodo grabs her and flees. Frollo chases them onto the balcony, where he attacks Quasimodo and Esmeralda with his sword. The battle ends with Frollo quoting a fake Bible verse, and him and Quasimodo both falling from the balcony. But Frollo falls into the molten copper, and he's officially dead, and Quasi is saved by Phoebus, who, thanks again Disney, somehow catches Quasi a couple floors below. Everyone celebrates their victory over Frollo, and Quasimodo reluctantly emerges from the cathedral to face the people again, only this time he's hailed as a hero and is finally accepted into society. And once again, there are so many directions I can still go with all of this, but being PJ, I'm going to start with the musical score of this film. Alan Menken, who also wrote the musical scores for so many other Disney films, including The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, just to name a few, he also wrote the scores for this movie with the help of Stephen Schwartz for the lyrics. And according to Menken himself, I believe he stated in an interview that The Hunchback is his best work. I completely agree. Each song, besides A Guy Like You, fit very well into the movie, and we talked a little bit about this last time as well, but you could take each song out of the context of the movie, and it would still work in real life. Well, maybe besides Hellfire, but I think we all get the idea. Speaking of which, Hellfire is my favorite song, not just from The Hunchback, but it's my favorite Disney song ever because it's just so incredibly dark, and Disney wasn't afraid of doing all that. So do you guys have a favorite song from the film?
I personally have a big connection with Out There. Anytime we have a random event with my theater organization, we usually have a set list of songs, and sometimes we'll throw in random other songs. Out There is an easy go-to song for me because it's vocally within my range, but also the meaning behind the song and about feeling trapped and wanting to go and explore and have a bajillion accomplishments in 5 minutes. I think that personally speaks to me, but the rest of the songs and the score are just phenomenal for this entire film. So if I had to pick one, I would pick Out There. But like you were saying, the entire song selection is just outstanding.
For me, I'd have to say God Help the Outcast. I'm a very religious person and really connected to the song and its message.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my, like, the whole entire musical score is just beautifully done, and you can't compare it to any other Disney movie because it is a true musical score of its own, and that's what I really like about it. But speaking of God Help the Outcast, I didn't mention this last time as well, but I still think it's so interesting. The original voice actors of Esmeralda, Demi Moore, the song wasn't in her range, so they got another performer, Heidi Mollenhauer, to sing that song, and I couldn't really even tell the difference until I read the credits, so props to Disney for finding someone that sounds a lot like Demi Moore. I mean, it sounded really good.
This is a very common thing for films and musical films for quite some time. Sometimes you'll have an actor that sounds really good, and then you'll need a performer to match because they can't sing. It happened with Scott in Aladdin. It's and Linda Larkin, who provides the speaking voice for Jasmine, could not vocalize the songs. So I almost said Susan Egan. That is not correct. Susan Egan is not the voice of Jasmine. It's Lea Salonga. I was like, what is her name? Lea Salonga, who is a very, very famous Broadway performer, provides the singing voice for Jasmine and Mulan. So this is a very common thing for Disney. But also, like, back in the musicals, like My Fair Lady also does it too. When not Julie Andrews. Julie Andrews did Broadway. See, this is my problem, is I get the theater and the movies all mixed up. Who was Eliza Doolittle in the movie? Audrey Hepburn. Oh my God, Eric, wake up. So Audrey Hepburn did the speaking parts, and while Audrey Hepburn was a singer, they wanted a very specific singing style for My Fair Lady, so they did the same thing with that as well. But you know when they book it good, when you can't tell when one transitions into the other. So like you were saying, PJ, like this was beautiful casting because it was a seamless transition from speaking to singing.
Yeah, I didn't even know that the same thing happened with Aladdin until you just mentioned it. So I'm like, wow, okay, cool. Disney, yeah, it sounds like Disney knows what they're doing, and they did such a great job with this movie too. And God Help the Outcast, by the way, wasn't actually supposed to be in the movie either. It was supposed to be in that segment a song called Someday. And I don't think they ever stated the reason why they cut Someday out of the movie and replaced it with God Help the Outcast, but they said, oh, well, I mean, Someday is too good of a song to be completely cut out of the movie. So instead, they got another group. I forgot their name too. What was the group name?
Was it Boyz II Men?
Anyway, no, it had men in the title somewhere. That's all I remember.
Hang on, I'm gonna look up.
But anyway,
keep going.
Yeah,
I'll interrupt.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, they got that group to sing that song, and they put it at the end credits for the movie, and they also used that song to promote the movie. So I thought that was really nice of Disney to do, and just not completely. Yes, I think that's them. Yeah. Yep, that's
yes.
Yep.
Yeah, this
awesome.
Is it.
Yeah, so they got
Suggested Beauty and the Beast. YouTube, get your life together. This is not no. Anyway, sorry.
No, that's okay. But yeah, it's a really beautiful song too, so I'm glad that they didn't completely cut it out. And another thing that I forgot to mention, since we're still on the topic of people who were switched out for different roles, one thing I did forget to mention: Mary Wicks, the voice of Laverne. Unfortunately, this was her last movie she ever filmed. She passed away from cancer shortly before the movie was finished, so Jane Withers stepped in and finished the rest of Laverne's lines, which at first, couldn't even tell again. You don't really notice until you learn what happened. So another, props to the casting team for finding another actress that sounds like Mary, and it's so unfortunate that Mary didn't get to finish what she started. But I'm so glad that, and they were able to find another actress so fast to still get the movie done. So yeah, that was pretty interesting too. Oh, and another thing I forgot to mention, Disney loves to put in Easter eggs in their films, and during the song Out There, we can see Belle from Beauty and the Beast, the magic carpet from Aladdin, and supposedly Pumbaa from The Lion King, but I've yet to find him. But they're all out there. Haha, that one was actually intentional. It was a little pun. But yeah, I thought that was really cool too. Now let's talk a little bit about Frollo. I know he's, in my opinion, the worst Disney villain of all time, but here's why he makes such a good villain. Unlike the other Disney villains who sometimes have magical powers and whatnot, Frollo doesn't have any powers whatsoever. He could very much be a real person, and that's what's so scary about him. And the fact that he thinks that everything he's doing is right makes it even more terrifying. Most of the other Disney villains are aware that they're being evil, but not Frollo. Frollo's the very definition of a hypocrite and will burn down all of Paris just because he thinks it's right and that he can get a girl. And that is hard for me to take in. And Frollo is just the best and worst Disney villain ever. The best villain Disney has ever created, and that's why he's my favorite. You can try and convince me that other villains are the worst, but Frollo is just, again, uncomparable. He's just a villain that is, I can't even describe it, but he's someone that could definitely be real.
Well,
and that's what's so terrifying about him.
Especially in the time that we're living in now, where all of the Me Too movement and all of that is coming out. This has been a major issue forever. And he's very relevant now as you can really pinpoint true evil on people that just mistreat people, period. And it was just really too easy to encapsulate that. Then you have, the Disney villain discussion goes on forever and will. Some people say Maleficent's the best because she turns into a dragon. Some people say Scar is the best because I feel like Scar and Frollo are very similar in personalities and motives and everything, except one is an animal. But they're very, what makes those villains so deeply connected with people is because they're so rooted in a very real place in reality. They're not, like you said, there's no magic involved. It's real world issues and real world problems and emotional issues, and that's something that can topple out of control into a very evil and corrupt mindset.
Let's see. And now what I really appreciate about this movie too is the fact that the Disney animators and team were actually sent to Paris to study Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
That really helped set up the movie. And guess what? France loved this movie. They still love it. Frollo is still a walk-around character at the Disneyland Paris park. Here in the States, every year they have the Halloween events where they bring out all the Disney villains. And Frollo was taken out a few years ago. I got really mad, and I don't really understand why they did, because he's obviously the best / worst villain. It made no sense to me. I'm sorry. No other villain will ever compare to how outrageous Frollo was. Anyway, he was my favorite walk-around character too, just because, I don't know, he just had, even his mask was kind of terrifying. And I saw a picture like online, I think it was on Tumblr, where he pretended to marry a couple who went to Disneyland, and I thought it was actually pretty epic. Because I'm like, well, he's a minister, that's pretty cool. Anyway, do you guys have a favorite walk-around Disney character?
Hi, all of them. Well, let me tell you a story as of recent. Recently, the Disney Princess Half Marathon happened here at Walt Disney World. I say here as if I'm like in the park right now. I'm not. And
you're close to it though.
So, valid. And I got sent a picture from one of my friends, and it was Tinkerbell, Vidya, and Terrence. And I'm like, excuse me. First of all, what? Second of all, Tinkerbell's not a princess, so please leave. I love the Tinkerbell franchise, but also, like, no. Third of all, Terrence is like one of my Terrence is one of my favorite characters from the Tinkerbell, just in general, but specifically in the Tinkerbell series. I'm like, oh my god, this is a character that is in my height range. This is a character that is voiced by Jesse McCartney, and I'm just like, oh my god, this is perfect. And then they took him out of the parks, and I haven't seen him, and this is the first time I've seen him in like 6 years, and I'm like, no, you can't have, I can't afford to run a half marathon at your Disney prices. Please stop this. So I'd say that if I was to pick a character interaction that always is fun, Tiana's always fun to meet. There's always fun times with Tiana. We met Anna once, and she started teaching us about animal noises. And she said, you know, reindeer, you talk like this. And then she said, ducklings, they go quack, 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 quack. And I was like, what is happening right now? But then she said turtle is one I learned recently. And you put your hands together, and you make your thumbs go, and then you go, ah! And I was like, what the actual hell was that noise that just escaped your vocals? Like, what just, and it is on video, and it is online.
I need to see it now.
Oh my god. And you could see my face like, what, just, what, who are you? Why are you, no? Yeah, so characters, they're always awkward.
Based on my experience, yeah, that's very true, actually.
The other one that I found a video for online, which I very much appreciated, this little girl. See, Disneyland has more roaming capabilities with their characters versus here where people, like, they want to meet the character. They need to know where they're going. They have to plan their, you know, vacation years in advance, and they need to know where they're going to be. Versus Disneyland, where it's a lot of locals, and they'll just kind of roam around, and they'll just follow them if they want to go and meet them. And if not, they'll just walk away. So there was a girl that went up to the evil queen from Snow White and said, are you still jealous of Snow White? And the evil queen grabbed this girl's hand and pushed everyone out of the way to the front of the princess meet and greet line, looked at the girl that was doing the meet and greet with the princesses and said, I think they're done with you. You can leave now. And I was like, oh my God, what is happening? And she went up and she looked at Snow White and she goes, you stand up. And she looked at the girl and she goes, now, this little girl asked me, why am I still jealous of you? And I just had to come over here and ask her, why on the earth would I be jealous of you? And she was like, Snow White was like, what? And she looked at Cinderella and she goes, Cinderella, what do you think? And Cinderella's like, I think you were both lovely. And she goes, you're so fair. You're even fair to the rodents that work here. You're friends with Mickey and Minnie. Went on this complete tangent. And she's like, Amelia, do you really think I'm jealous of her? And she goes, I don't know, maybe. And she goes, me with all my natural beauty and not a drop of makeup on my face and her covered with me. And I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. It was amazing. Absolutely incredible. And those are the moments I remember forever. I will quote that. The other one, I'm going to keep going. I can go on tangents. This will be the last one.
No, I love this. Please keep going.
The other one was, I have one from when I was 5. That's not as fun. There was a video contest, probably more than 10 years ago now. I think it was during the Year of a Million Dreams. They had a video contest of what was your favorite. Oh, no, it was the Let the Memories Begin campaign. That's what it was. It was the Let the Memories Begin campaign, and they did a video entry contest where it was, share your favorite Disney memory, and maybe you'll win a trip to Disney and blah, 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 whatever. So this girl with this thick Southern accent, she had to be like 5, was like, my favorite Disney memory is when I went to Disney World, I was watching the parade at night, and I saw Peter Pan, and I said, Peter Pan, Peter Pan, and Peter Pan came over to me, and he said, do you want to be a real fairy princess? And I said, yeah. I have this thing memorized. It's really bad. And I said, yes. And she said, well, slap my hand, and I said, okay, and I did, and his lights turned all white. Now I'm going to marry Peter Pan. I was like, oh my God, I love this so much. It's just the best. My favorite character experience, however, though, is when Maleficent caught on fire down here. That was a wonderful experience. It actually wasn't. It was pretty terrifying, but, here we are. I'm sure you guys have heard about that, yes?
No.
I actually haven't.
Oh, yeah. What happened was we had a new parade. It premiered 5 years ago this month. And last year, so one of the segments, they were going to cut the Maleficent float out. So it's this big steampunk dragon. And they were going to cut the dragon out of the parade because it was just going to be too much money and all this stuff. And they said, what if we make it steampunk? And now it's like the face of the marketing for this parade and everything in this park now is this dragon. Well, the dragon breathes real fire. And I was like, the parade premiere, and I said, I am shocked that passed. I am shocked because there are so many things that go wrong in an instant. And I'm like, I can't believe they allowed this. It was beautiful and it worked really well. And everyone flipped when they saw it. And they're like, oh, that's so cool. Well, something malfunctioned one day and the entire neck exploded. And the fire was just like coming out and the entire dragon was melting. And there was nothing they could do but try to let it they were getting fire extinguishers and everything, but they were sitting there with people watching and it had to stop and they couldn't continue moving the rest of the parade because it was on fire. So yeah. And they just about a month ago now, just put it back in. They finally fixed it. They got the head that they needed. They fixed her head. It did 8
took them 5 years?
Well, no. It took them about a year. It was supposed to take a couple of months. And then they kept, they were doing the safety testing, and the safety testing kept, at any time that the committee would come in to, verify everything, something else would go wrong. So then they have to go back to square one and figure out, well, why did that go wrong? And, it was a mess. My other favorite dragon story, so now we have, I promise this is the last dragon story, and then we'll actually go back to talking about Hunchback. This is why people say Maleficent's their favorite character. And I'm like, I just love telling these stupid stories. So in Disneyland, they have the Phantasmic show. At the end, Mickey fights the Maleficent dragon and everything. Well, about 10 years ago, the Phantasmic show got a massive refurbishment. And it used to be just a dragon head that would come out and it'd be like, oh, it's Maleficent. And well, then they added a full body. Well, a tech person was getting impatient and said, I'm not waiting for the people. I'm going to do the test now, and then we'll just reset everything when they come back. Well, he did the test and everything worked okay. And then the people came through to do the tour to do the final check. Well, something happened to where he didn't reset it properly and let the hydraulic fluid drain properly. So when he hit go, the whole thing convulsed and then fell over, and it wouldn't work the night it was supposed to premiere.
Oh, wow.
So everyone was like, what's happening? So this big summer promotion where all this new dragon was supposed to come out and it was the face of everything, didn't come out, and everyone was like, no. And then they kept saying it's going to come back tonight, and then it didn't, and then it's going to come back tonight, and it did. It just kept pushing back, and finally they were like, it's coming back. It's going to be tonight. And I was like, yeah, sure. Oh my God. If you go online and look at this video, everyone loses their minds when this dragon's eyes light up. I have never heard, it gives me chills. I've never heard people go this crazy over anything in my entire life. And I think that's part of the problem that we're having right now is like Sleeping Beauty and some of these other movies are just so heavily pushed in these parks. And it's what people expect to see. And then other movies like Pocahontas and like Hunchback and Mulan and Hercules and Tarzan, you'll have
pretty much most of the other movies.
For everything after Lion King. And you'll get like little stints of things. Like we had the Pocahontas show for a while, and we had the Tarzan skate rock band show. It was a weird show. It was a very weird show.
There was, and there was the Hunchback show too, wasn't there?
There was the Hunchback show in Florida, and then there was one in California as well. Yeah. They did, which everyone loved. And like once the next movie came along, it was like, okay, let's forget about it. Like I guess that's it. And I'm like, guys, what are you doing? People actually enjoy this, which is why I'm glad that Paris actually enjoys this movie and this franchise and this everything about this film. Because then they will put the representation in the park. And I'm like, why can't we have here?
I know, because they, the World of Color, I was in Disneyland last time, I think in 2015, and I'd seen the World of Color show. It was my first time seeing it. I'd never heard about it before. I actually went and saw it.
But
Hellfire, it was so beautiful. And Hellfire was in the villains segment, and I thought that was the perfect fit. And they cut it out like last year or something. I was like, why? That's like the perfect song for that segment.
Here's my other
got the
problem.
Fire shooting up. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
And it was beautifully orchestrated to fit the show. It wasn't like copy paste like they do for a lot of the shows. Like, oh, we're just going to pull from the soundtrack. This was a beautiful recreation. Now, my issue with World of Color and many other of the Disney nighttime and daytime spectacular stuff is they push all of the animated films, which is fine. But then they throw Pirates of the Caribbean in there. And I'm like, stop. This is not an animated film. It sticks out. It's really awkward. The music's great. I completely understand it. But I also don't need to hear in every single thing that you do in your park. Stop it.
Right. They already have a ride. It's fine. And live action, like, thrown in with all this other animated stuff.
Give Hellfire back its spot. Like, leave it alone.
I know.
Rude.
Anyways, Rico, what's your favorite who's your favorite walk around character?
All right.
Yeah, we're sorry.
The only time I've been to a Disney park was back in June of 2014. After I graduated, I went with my band and choir from high school over to
Disney Performing Arts.
Disney World, yeah. I actually did enjoy the choir bit where they have them do like one of the songs and pair it up with actual Disney footage.
Yes.
To be honest, I did not actually go to see any of the walk around characters. So that being said, there was this one feel-good story from a few years ago, I believe, where there was a deaf person who came up. I forget, was it Cinderella? Or was one of the walk-around characters, and it just so happened that the person playing the character happened to also know sign language, and so they were able to communicate back and forth with sign language.
Oh, there might be a video of that one too. I think I've actually seen that one.
I'm sure there is.
There are a few videos of different characters using sign language, and it's absolutely incredible. No, I will not sidetrack with another story about meeting characters. We're going to continue forward. I'm not taking up more time. We can do an entire podcast of like Eric talks about the characters.
But Eric, I know you mentioned earlier that who did you mention was not a Disney? Oh, Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell not being a Disney. Esmeralda used to be a Disney princess, but then they took her out because she's like, well, they said she's not technically, and I know she's not technically a Disney princess, but come on, she did so many incredible things in the film that I don't think the other princesses did, and Mulan's not a princess either, really. So it's
Okay, so let
why
me tell
take
you. Let me tell you a little bit about this whole thing. So the Disney Princess line depends on how the marketing is. So it's who can appear on what merchandise. So if it's a Disney Parks merchandise, that is the only time. If it says Disney Parks with the castle on it, that is the only time that like Mickey and Cinderella can appear together on merchandise, but they can't be next to each other. Like it's a whole big slew of like legalities within the company. It's stupid. So then the Disney Princess line goes with these are the characters that can legally appear together on the Disney Princess line. And it has nothing to do with the like coronations, because that was more of a recent thing. That's a marketing ploy. Like I don't understand why they even started doing that. It's stupid. Anyways, so the reason why Mulan, and I don't know how true this is, this was somebody went up to Mulan at Epcot and said, I have a question as to why you're considered a princess, because Chinese culture doesn't have princesses. And she said, well, when the emperor passes away, the person that's in charge of the Chinese army becomes the emperor. So in that case, it'd be Shang, which would make Shang like the Chinese equivalent of a prince. And because she marries Shang, she is considered a princess. And I was like, sneaky, sneaky. Like, yeah. I'll take that, whether that's true or not. But yeah, I feel like there needs to be the Disney heroine line where it's like anybody that's not a Disney princess in like on that franchise. So we have like Esmeralda, we have Pocahontas goes back and forth with the Disney princess line. Technically,
yeah.
Meg from Hercules.
Oh yes. And thinking Kida from Treasure Planet is another good one. Oh my god,
yes.
Or not Treasure Planet, Atlantis.
Atlantis. I knew what you meant.
Yeah.
Somebody had Atlantis on the other day, and I was like, oh, what a great movie.
I know, that's my second favorite very close behind Hunchback, but I love that movie almost just as much.
So back to Hunchback. I feel like that's what the title of this podcast is. Back to Hunchback.
Well, yeah, we're talking about the Hunchback. So there were a lot of differences, of course, between the book and the movie. I've mentioned a couple already. But like I also said, the book was really dark. Pretty much everyone died in the book. And then in this one, of course, Disney had to make it lighter. I mean, there were a lot of like tricks. They pretend like it seemed like Esmeralda died, but then she didn't. It looked like Quasimodo was gonna die too, but then he didn't. So I thought that was kind of creative. And then in the original book, Frollo isn't actually the evil one. He is actually the archdeacon himself, and he willingly adopts Quasimodo in the book. So I thought that was really cool, but unfortunate in Disney's version. What else? Try to look at the little list I got here. Oh, in the book, Esmeralda was only 16 years old. In the film, it looks like she's in her like mid-20s to early 30s. Yeah, but she's definitely not 16 in the film. And then in the book, Quasimodo is named Quasimodo for a completely different reason, and not because his name supposedly means half-formed. Thought that was interesting too. Let's see what. Oh, and Frollo has a brother. I think it's Jihan. I don't know how to say his name, but he's in the book as well, not in the movie. The Gargoyles are obviously not in the book. However, I did forget to mention him again. Esmeralda's goat, Jolly, is in the book and in the movie, but he doesn't really play any sort of role in either one. He's just kind of there. But I think he's a really cool character. He's really cute too. And I think there's a whole entire list of like the differences between the book and the movie. But and the fact that Disney was able to still get away with a G rating with so many like references that are more mature. I still don't understand to this day.
You know, it's interesting because the book was really more of yes, it was a kind of a fairy tale type story and a political commentary, but also like it goes on forever talking about the architecture of this building, about the Notre Dame Cathedral. And it's like, it's a very dry read. Victor Hugo did not put a lot of emotion into his writing. It was very cut and dry and very descriptive. And it was like, So, however, though, this literally saved the Notre Dame Theater. Like, it's a theater. Oh my God. The Notre Dame Cathedral. Same thing.
Essentially, I was gonna say, yeah.
Oh my God, they put a big production in there. It's like, Notre Dame. Any hoozles. So yeah, this saved the Notre Dame Cathedral from being like demolished, and like the refurbishments are continuing to happen today and keep it up and running, and people want to see it because they know of it because of this book, which I think is great. But also, like, can we please give some character depth and development? One of the things about this book and the adaptations is you have this issue where the book was adapted into a medium. I think it was first adapted into like a silent film, and then it continued to be adapted. But the adaptations that have come after each other adaptation were an adaptation of the previous one. So as opposed to going back to the source material of the book, it was kind of like the Disney one went, well, let's look at all these other adaptations and let's take the best of those and then do what we want with it, like Disney does. And, you know, here we are. So, you know, Disney, when you compare it to the book, it really isn't much anything like the book. I think the general gist of it is, but like, it's a very unique identity.
Yeah, I think that's what I really like about this film is that it didn't really go off the other adaptations. Disney just kind of interpreted the book the way that they thought was most appropriate for children. So, yeah. And then I know I don't know much about the theater show, but I know you mentioned that last time, Eric.
Oh, would you like me to talk about the musical? Because I can do that.
Yes, please.
All right. Well, back in like 1998, The Lion King on Broadway premiered in New York, and there's a German theatrical company that Germany's not very well known for their musicals, and they really haven't done very many. And they said, we want to do The Lion King. And Thomas Schumacher, who was in charge of Disney Theatrical, was like, oh, yes. No, absolutely not. And they said, but we've been talking about doing an adaptation of Hunchback of Notre Dame. Like, maybe you could try that, and we'll do that out of town. And they did, and it was extreme. It ran for, I think, 3 or 4 years out in Germany. It was a glorious success. Massive. The stuff that they were able to accomplish with lighting and projection with this show in 1999 was just outstanding. There's footage of it online. It's as good as you can get. Like, it's not like a bootleg that you can get now or some of the professional footage that you can get now, but you can still see how they functioned, everything. This was one of the most intense productions at the time when I was in high school, when I was starting to discover this. I'm like, oh my God, I want everything. I want this in New York. I want everything about this. And then they said, we're going to go to New York. And then they said, oh, we're not going to go to New York. And then they haven't. And I'm very upset about it. My biggest issue is when they did it here, when they did the tryouts here, they took... When you think of Notre Dame, you think of this gloriously large, massive cathedral, this huge set piece, and you think it's going to be great. When they took it here, they did it like it was a traveling gypsy show. And it's like, that's not... I understand what you were going for, but you're missing the scale.
Yep.
And you have shows like Moulin Rouge is coming to New York, and they took the scale and they blew it up because they knew they had to for what the show was. And Disney missed that opportunity, and then I think the transfer suffered because of that. They didn't want to put the money into it. They didn't know if it was actually going to go to New York. They didn't want to put the money into it if it wasn't. Like, it was a mess. The musical, however, goes back to some of the sources of the book. they very clearly make sure that you understand that the gargoyles are inside Quasimodo's mind. I think that the Gargoyles song is in the show, but it's placed in a different spot in the show, so it's not as awkward in the plot.
But like the lyrics didn't change or anything like that, right?
Well, it's in German, so I really don't know if they changed or not. It's there. I know the tone of it. I was kind of like, oh, okay, whatever. Like, and it didn't bother me as much that the song was in the show because it was very clear that the gargoyles were figments of his imagination and like his coping mechanism, basically. The other thing that they did was Esmeralda was burning at the stake, and then Someday was put back into the plot of the show. So she sings God Help the Outcast earlier, and then as she's getting ready to be burned at the stake, that's when Someday comes into the plot, and it's hard. And everyone's like sobbing in the audience, and oh my God, and then Quasimodo saves her. And then, yeah, so it worked really well with it being able to be in a stage format. And then Quasimodo takes her and brings her up, and Frollo comes out, and he's like, oh, la, la. And then Esmeralda dies, and Quasimodo's like, blah, I hate this, and all this chaos ensues. So Esmeralda dies in the musical, unlike in the movie, where it's like, just kidding, and I'm like, I'm going to turn this off now. So the German production did just such a beautiful job of doing this adaptation, and I feel like we took it to America and we did the thing where we Americanize it, and it just the tone doesn't match anymore, and it's very hurtful. Now, there was a production in New York, somewhere in New York. It was one of the theaters. It's not Broadway, where they cast they cast two performers for Quasimodo. One of them was the singing voice, and one of them did signing. So the one that did signing was Quasimodo, the character, and then the singer was behind him, talking and singing and basically playing the translator to the audience if they didn't know ASL. And it is the most incredible thing I have ever seen. And it was so simple. It was such a simple thing for them to do. And it just added a whole nother layer of just beauty to this plot and depth to the character.
Yeah, and I was going to say that after you mentioned the stage show during the first recording of this episode, I actually, because they did a show at the Fifth Avenue Theater here in Seattle, their adaptation of the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and they did just that. The person who played Quasimodo was an actual deaf person, and he did ASL, and there was a guy that posed as one of the gargoyles and interpreted for him. He was actually the singing voice, and then the person playing Quasimodo was actually using ASL, and I think it's just one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. It's just perfectly done. It fits so well with both Disney's version and in the novel, and I don't think there was a better way to do it. I just think, because in the book, Quasi, I think he is deaf, and then he's partially blind. I don't exactly remember.
Oh, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and so he's actually disabled, and then he basically has no voice. And so having a person in real life who is disabled play a disabled character is something that I always love seeing. It brought so much joy to me.
Yeah, I love when theatrical companies are able to do way more with their programs. Theater allows you to really play with the concepts and ideas, whether it's downsizing things and putting it in libraries setting like some of the programs that we do, or taking things and using projections and lighting and choreography and being able to tell a story completely differently than the next organization that's going to do it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's they're able to connect with audiences in a much more intimate way. It's sometimes more intimate than, which is interesting because you think a movie theater, you're right up with the screen, but when you have somebody like an actual person in front of you, regardless of where you're sitting in the theater, there is a connection that's going to be felt no matter what.
Yeah, and I've always wanted to do theater too, so it's just it's all very like amazing to me on how all that works, and it being the difference between sitting in front of a movie screen and then having it be live is there's that connection with the person playing the character, and that makes it so much more special. And I think that's why I regret not seeing the show, because it's like, oh, there's a disabled person playing a disabled character, and there's that connection he's trying to tell you, and I'm like, oh yeah, I should have gone and seen it, because it sounds like an amazing show.
Maybe it'll tour one day. Maybe we'll get a good production to tour. Maybe I'll be Quasimodo. Probably not.
well, there is talk about the Hunchback being the next live action movie. I hope that it happens. I would like to see it, but I don't think it's gonna happen. Just because it didn't do as well as the other movies, but we'll see.
Yeah, and that's what's bothering me, is they're only sticking with the movies that did well in theaters the first round, and I'm like, this is not the point of these live-action movies, guys. The point is to be able to expand on the plot, which is why you have movies like Pete's Dragon, which I was like, I'm not going to go see this, and I ended up watching it anyways, and was like, oh my god, this is so much better than I thought it was going to be, and it's so different than the original, so you can't really compare them, which is great. And I'm like, okay, this is good. Then you have Beauty and the Beast, and it is trash, and I hate it.
Yep. No,
I
me
have
too.
very distinct opinions on Beauty and the Beast. How dare they? Ugh.
They changed like one part of the character's personality, and they call that a change, and then they keep everything else the same. And I'm like, then what was the point? Just retelling the story with live that doesn't make any sense to me.
Or what about the quote live action version of Lion King that's coming out?
Yeah, don't even get me started on that crap.
I don't know if I want to see that one, because I didn't see The Lion King until later in life, so I really don't have a firm opinion on that one. Like, I know that everyone who saw the movie as a kid is either really excited to see this version, or they don't want to see it at all. I'm just over here like, I don't want any part of this. Don't look at me. I'll stick to Hunchback.
Right? Exactly. Hi. Here we are. Sunset in Campton.
Yeah. All right, and I think the last thing that I wanted to mention, which I don't want to mention, but it's a little important. The Hunchback got a sequel. Yes, a very bad, low-budget sequel, like most of the Disney movies in the Renaissance era. Don't watch it. It's really stupid. And the only purpose it served was to get Quasimodo a girlfriend, really. Which, by the way, she saw the Gargoyles too, so it's kind of confirmed that unfortunately they are there.
Or that she's crazy.
Or she's also crazy. Yeah. Anyways, I hope I saved you from watching it. Please don't. Just don't. It's badly animated, poorly drawn, and a lot of the Renaissance era movies were like that too. Like the sequel to Aladdin, the sequels to Beauty and the Beast, they were just so low budget, and Disney was like, hey, let's just make some extra money and poorly draw this movie, and they called those sequels, and I don't like any of them, to be honest.
Quasimodo's eyes changed 3 colors several times throughout the entire plot, and it makes me furious. How dare you do this to me?
No.
How hard is it to pick a color and say these are his eyes, and not even just pick a color? You don't even get that opportunity because you have a prequel to look at and compare, so you're just lazy on every level. Ugh. Rude.
Yeah, and there's this post. There was a post going around on Tumblr, like comparing all the original movies, Disney, the Renaissance era movies, to their sequels, and some of the changes are just. I wish I hadn't seen them. They just look so awful. The magic carpet from Aladdin in the sequel was like not even detailed. It looks so
awkward.
bad.
It's real
so
awkward.
Awkward and so bad.
Yeah, I came across that post a few years ago, but then all of a sudden the post got improved majorly when they cut to a GIF of I think it was originally from Vine, where someone's trying to recreate the Pixar logo. So they have.
Yes, I've seen that. Oh my.
Yeah.
It's just a lampshade like there's a string tied to a lampshade and they're just kind of bouncing it around on the floor, knocking over the letter. It's the greatest thing, but that's the exact interpretation of what Disney was actually doing.
Super accurate.
Yep. All right, so I think that's all the points that I had. So any final thoughts about The Hunchback?
I think The Hunchback is a wonderful movie. I think the sequel is a piece of garbage. I think the only good thing to come out of the sequel is the song. I forgot the song title last time, too. I'm gonna love you for the rest of my life. The other thing, too, is Jennifer Love Hewitt is the voice of that crazy lady whose name I do not know and do not care to know.
Madeline.
Yes, okay. And I love Jennifer Love Hewitt, but also, like, why would you do this? Why would you pick such a terrible movie to do? I guess a paycheck's a paycheck. Hunchback is a very pretty movie. It's very pretty animated. It's very pretty music. It's very pretty. I think everyone should enjoy Hunchback of Notre Dame. The end.
Well, for me, when I first saw The Hunchback of Notre Dame, I was a little shocked, like, at least for the tone of it. Like, this actually is a Disney movie.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, and I saw this in the old recording, but I'll have to say it again. When I first watched it, I thought it was PG, and I didn't find out it was rated G until the first time we recorded this.
Yeah, I know the first time that I watched it, I had the exact same reaction. I was like, how in the world? I bet you it was the Gargoyles, and that probably explains it. But at the same time, it's like, even if you overlook the Gargoyle, or if you put in, like, I don't know, more Gargoyles segments, I don't know how it can still be rated G, because it's like, yeah, they're funny, and it's funny. I used air quotations for that. And they're supposed to be the comic relief in the movie, but it's still so mature, and you know, you got religion, you got lust, you got all these subjects that are more mature, and it somehow still gets away with it. I don't understand.
Here we are.
And here we are.
Well, I think the best way to wrap this up, based on all of the experiences and the sidetracking that we've had, is that someday when we are wiser, when we are older, and when we have learned, I pray someday you may let live and to no. Out there strolling by the sun. That's where we're going to end this. The end.
Yay! Well, thank you all for tuning into this week's episode of Beyond the Lens, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Toodaloo.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Lens. The intro music is Work. That's WERQ by Kevin MacLeod. It is available under a Creative Commons Attribution License and can be downloaded for free at incompetech.com. Beyond the Lens is a Record Entertainment production.
The Hunchback of Notre Dame episode, like part 2, walk around character.
Part two. Hunchback of Notre Dame. We're gonna talk about the Hunchback of Notre Dame as much as Disney does. They don't, and neither will we. Good God.